It's September of 2024, and that means that the Nintendo Switch successor is probably going to get announced like soon, maybe even this month, if rumors are to be believed. So I feel like now is pretty much my exact last moment that I can make some predictions, and I can like throw out a wish list of things that I'd like to see in the next Nintendo Switch before they all get confirmed and or denied by Nintendo themselves in an upcoming first prediction. Tweet and YouTube video upload with absolutely no fanfare at all. It will just arrive one day completely at random with no like precursor. We will be having a Nintendo Direct tomorrow where we will announce the next Nintendo console, etc., etc. Which actually, I do think Nintendo has painted themselves into a little bit of a corner. I've talked about this on Into the Aether a bit, but I feel like because so many of the recent Nintendo Directs have said something to the effect of, we're going to have 30 minutes of games, we will not be talking about the successor to the Nintendo Switch. They now are in a situation where if they announce a Nintendo Direct and it doesn't say it will not contain information about the next Nintendo Switch, everyone will immediately know that it's about the next Nintendo Switch. The only way you combat that is by just straight up dropping the trailer. Just drop the thing. Similar to that original Switch trailer, where there's like a bunch of like cool 20-somethings hanging out on a San Francisco rooftop playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the Joy-Cons. It'll be something like that. It'll be like the Nintendo Switch 2 lifestyle brand trailer. And that's actually maybe a good place to start because we've seen how Nintendo's very strange naming conventions can put them in hot water with things like the Nintendo Wii U. I think what they name this thing is going to be weirdly very, very important in a lot of ways because pretty much every other Nintendo console performs well. So the N64 did pretty well, and then the GameCube was performing under expectations, like financially. And then the Nintendo Wii, obviously a slam dunk. And then after that, the Wii U, bad name. A lot of people thought it was just like an accessory for the Nintendo Wii, but also didn't meet expectations. Didn't get a lot of third-party support, didn't get a lot of indie support. It just like didn't do super well. It was pretty much just Nintendo's first-party consoles keeping that thing alive, Heimlich maneuvering it over the line until the Nintendo Switch came out, and then the Nintendo Switch, which is obviously, again, one of the biggest deals maybe ever when it comes to a video game console. Okay, so how do you avoid that problem this time around? How do you avoid the Nintendo Wii U problem? Because, I mean, they even kind of dipped their toe in it a little bit with the 3DS, right? They had the Nintendo 3DS, and then they had the new Nintendo 3DS. You can see the boardroom of people thinking that that's actually a very clear way of naming it. You can see the, like, branding and marketing team at Nintendo being like, and it'll be called the new 3DS, therefore there will be no confusion when somebody walks into a GameStop and is like, hello, I would like this game for the new 3DS. They ran into two problems. Number one, not many games made use of the fact that it was the new 3DS. And number two, that didn't really say a lot about what it did or how different it was from the 3DS as well. I have my new 3DS right here, which I, for some reason, am showing off in every episode of this show. But it had the circle pad. That was nice. It had the little circle pad nub, the ThinkPad nub on there. So that was kind of cool. It could play Earthbound. You could get Earthbound on it. And also Xenoblade Chronicles, the like Nintendo 3DS demake of Xenoblade Chronicles. What other games were available for the new 3DS? I actually don't even remember what other games. I remember Monster Hunter was better on the new 3DS, but I don't remember what other things were exclusive to it. I think not a whole lot because they didn't want to fragment the player base too much. So they kind of released this thing and then didn't really need to support it because the regular 3DS was doing so well. So like, why do it in the first place? I don't really know, but I'm glad they did because now I have my KK slider on one side, and this is the bottom faceplate from a Timmy and Tommy faceplate set. Anyway, they stepped in it a little bit with the new 3DS also. So there are a bunch of names that a lot of people think the next Switch will have. First of all, is it going to even have the word Switch in it? I think probably, because there's enough marketing and branding behind the idea of the Switch. The clicky sound you hear at the beginning of every trailer released for the Nintendo Switch, stuff like that. I mean, it feels like it would be weird to get rid of that. But if you're going to keep the name Switch, then you're bumping up against what happened with the Wii, which also had a lot of brand recognition, and the 3DS, which also had a lot of brand recognition. I think a good place to look, weirdly, is the difference between the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo 3DS, where the Nintendo DS was obviously also a hugely successful handheld console. And then when they needed to make a successor to the Nintendo DS, they were like, what is the gimmick? Oh, it's going to be 3D. The top screen will be 3D. It'll look largely the same. But when they named it, naming it the 3DS, it was like, it told you that it was in the DS lineage. So you were like, I know what that is. I know what the DS is. And it very accurately described what was different about it this time. It had 3D. One name that I keep seeing people throw around a lot, and I kind of love, but you do need to think about it a little bit, is the Super Switch. And by you need to think about it, I mean you have to think about the fact that Nintendo won't just call it the Super Switch, because of like Nintendo brand guidelines and just the way companies of this size who are this obsessed with branding work. It's going to have to be like the Nintendo Super Switch, or my preferred version of it and a branding department's nightmare version of it, the Super Nintendo Switch. Because Super Nintendo Switch sounds better, and I guarantee... Let me know in the comments, actually, if you feel this way. I think everyone on Earth thinks that sounds better, Super Nintendo Switch, but I think a branding department won't allow anything to come before Nintendo. I think Nintendo needs the word Nintendo to be at the beginning. It is the alpha and the omega. It is the most important thing, and therefore it's the top. It's like in the United States, how there's like a whole deal where the United States, like the American flag, needs to be higher than like the state flag. It's weirdly similar to that, where the brand department is like Nintendo first, then Super, then Switch. I think that's a fun name, though. I think the Super Nintendo Switch would be like a really killer name for that thing. There's the other obvious one, which is just the Nintendo Switch 2. They haven't done that before. They've never just been like, yeah, dude, it's a sequel. PlayStation does it. PlayStation's on 5 of them at this point. If PlayStation can have 5 PlayStations, then Nintendo can have 2 Nintendo Switches. And I think that clearly defines the difference between the two devices in like a very big way. I think if you just call it the Nintendo Switch 2, there is no confusion. Well, there's always going to be a little confusion, but like when somebody's parent goes into a GameStop or goes on Amazon.com and there are 2 versions of a game, one for the Nintendo Switch and one for the Nintendo Switch 2, the question of which one do I own should be apparent. Hopefully. We'll see. If they call it the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm kind of more interested in what the branding is going to look like. Because I'm looking, I have my OLED Switch in its OLED Switch dock sitting on my desk right now. And I'm just looking at the Nintendo Switch logo on that thing right now, and I'm like, where do you put the 2? I don't know where you put the 2. The most horrible name I can think of that for some reason I could also see them doing is going back and cashing in on the brand recognition and the nostalgia of the Nintendo Wii. And if you want to fit a 2 in the name of Nintendo Switch, call it the Nintendo Switch with 2 I's. And then you have like the Roman numeral 2. It also happens to be the Nintendo Wii, and that is contained within the word Switch. It is horrible to say, it is horrible to look at, but like, wouldn't that be very funny if they went all in on that? Because like, I just imagine the like the poor Nintendo Treehouse like indie world commentators in those live streams who are gonna have to say coming soon to Nintendo Switch. Just like some indie game trailer where it's like a little pixel art blowfish, like a puffer fish underwater, and it's like little Fumbliss needs to save the ocean floor, coming soon to Nintendo Switch. Or even better, Microsoft said in their court case that they would put the next Call of Duty, or maybe the one after that, on Nintendo hardware. So like, whatever the next Call of Duty is has to come out on the successor to the Nintendo Switch, and that announcement will be very funny. Just like the most hardcore, brutal, gross, off-putting trailer for a video game you've ever seen, followed immediately by Call of Duty coming to the Nintendo Switch. I love it. I think they should call it that. I think it should be the Nintendo Switch. Okay, here's the real idea, though. All of those were fun ideas, don't get me wrong, but here's like the real idea. My dream scenario for this is that Nintendo calls it the Nintendo. And they go like the Apple route with the iPhone. And they just drop Switch, they drop everything else. They're like, remember when in the 80s and the 90s when like boomers and the parents of boomers just called every video game console the Nintendo? And Nintendo themselves, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, ran ads, like print ads that were like, don't call it Nintendo, it's Super Nintendo, or something like that. It was something like that. What if they were like, actually, let's own it. Let's Uno reverse card. Let's own this. The next Nintendo Switch is just called the Nintendo. And when you walk into a store and you're like, I would like the Nintendo, they would be like, is this for the 2025 Nintendo? Don't get me wrong. It's horrible. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there's something so unbelievably like bold about it. There's something like really brave about being like, we don't even need a subtitle for this thing. 64, nah. GameCube, nah. Wii, nah. It's Nintendo as a brand is strong enough that you could just walk into a store and be like Nintendo. It's like Band-Aid, Walking into a place and being like, hey, where do you keep the Band-Aids? You're looking at a whole aisle of adhesive medical strips and you're looking for Band-Aids. This is unrelated. You know who I think is close to that? Is Listerine with mouthwash. Is that interesting? Is that an interesting observation? I don't know. It's in the video. You tell me. And then there's the wild card, right? There's the wild card that they don't even use the word Switch at all, which I think is maybe the most fun option, is like, what can they come up with? Because, like, it's probably going to look like the Switch in a lot of ways. It'd be really weird to not have it look like the Switch. It would be very strange to have it be a completely different device, because it's still going to need to be portable and handheld, unless Nintendo is deciding that they want to get into both markets separately again, which, like... No, they won't do that. I did think about it for a couple seconds, though. Could you imagine if they did that? That'd be really weird. I think the thing is going to look like the Switch again. It's going to have slightly different looking Joy-Cons. I think the screen, well, we'll talk about the screen later, but I feel like the screen is going to look a little different. Everything about it's going to be a little different, but it's still going to look pretty recognizably like the Nintendo Switch. And because of that, I think they're going to use the word Switch in there. I think Super Nintendo Switch is the one, personally. I think that's the most fun one. Will I put money on it? Yes. $1 whole. I'll give $1 to one viewer. I won't do that. I don't even know how to do that. I couldn't even tell you how to do that without putting myself in the line of fire of getting all of my money scammed out of my bank account. Okay, speaking of it looking like the Nintendo Switch, let's just get this out of the way. The thing is going to be backwards compatible. I think there's no way that the next Nintendo Switch is not backwards compatible. I understand why people think that it might not be. This is Nintendo we're talking about. I wouldn't say they always make the most logical decision. Frequently, they don't. They make the exact opposite of that. But I think this time around, they're going to do the right thing. I think the thing is going to be backwards compatible. This is a company that's like not even very comfortable acknowledging the fact that there will be a follow-up to the Nintendo Switch. I think that their thought there, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think that their thought is like, if we announce that there's another Switch coming ever, it will make people stop buying the current one, which, like, I get that to a certain degree. But I mean, it's been years and years of rumor. This is the thing about Nintendo, is that what they think is that people only acknowledge official communication from Nintendo, and that any conversation happening online around their products doesn't count really at all. Like, it's not a real thing. So the fact that there has been like a lot of reporting on what the next Switch is going to be, and a lot of rumors over the years about what the next Switch is going to be, that has not impacted, in their eyes, their messaging about what the next Switch is going to be at all. That having been said, despite them not wanting to ever officially acknowledge that there is a sequel to the Switch coming at some point, they have gone on record as saying your Nintendo Online account will carry over to the next Nintendo console. And that's not exactly confirmation, like, directly from Nintendo. It's also not confirmation directly from Nintendo. My bigger question is, like, what does that mean? And will it work with physical cartridges as well? This is so dumb. I just had to go dig up a 3DS game. I literally have my 3DS still sitting on my desk with a game in it, and it is Dragon Quest VII, Fragments of the Forgotten Past, which is a wonderful video game that I would recommend playing if you haven't. If you want to play a game for like literally the rest of your whole life, I'm just kidding. It's like 80 to 100 hours though. It's a big video game. That's a big video game in that little cart. Anyway, while I'm holding this and while I'm holding The Legend of Zelda: The Link Between Worlds, notice how they both have those little nubs there on this side. That is the difference between DS and 3DS games. That is how you know a game fits in the Nintendo 3DS and would not fit in the regular Nintendo DS. And I'm wondering if they're going to do the same thing with the Nintendo Switch 2, where there will be some kind of physical difference between the two carts, but largely they're the same and fit in the same slot. So like you could use a physical Nintendo Switch game in the next Nintendo Switch, but you cannot put a Super Nintendo Switch game, I'm just going to call it that, in the old Nintendo Switch. Anyway, again, what does that mean, though? Because there's also been a lot of speculation and a lot of wishes. I'll throw this on the wish list for me. I really hope that there's some kind of performance improvement when you play an old Switch game on the new Switch. And I think the most likely version of that is literally just going to be graphical fidelity. I think, if I was to guess, the handheld experience of the next Nintendo Switch, of the Super Nintendo Switch, will be 1080p handheld and 4K docked. And I think they're going to pull off 4K the way everyone thinks they're going to pull off 4K, which is that there's something in the dock that will upscale it using something similar to like FSR or DLSS. I guess DLSS, right? Because NVIDIA is like a partner with Nintendo for the Nintendo Switch, if I'm not mistaken. So I think the situation is like the dock won't just be like a very nice, fancy thing that you like throw your Nintendo Switch in, but by all means, it's basically just like a USB-C hub that you could buy for your MacBook or whatever. I think that it will actually have some hardware in it this time, and that hardware will upscale it to 4K. I don't know if that means like actual performance improvements for other video games, because like my kingdom for Nintendo to release a Nintendo Switch that is so powerful, it just brute forces Pokemon Scarlet and Violet into running perfectly. Like, wouldn't that be so fun if they just released the next Nintendo Switch and no patches necessary? It was like, oh yeah, this is actually all Scarlet and Violet needed, which is like a little more horsepower, and then it ran perfectly. Because I want to finish that. I have not finished that game. I want to finish it. I own the DLC. I think they had 2 expansions for that thing. I want to play it, and I have not, because I haven't finished the main game. And I don't consider myself to be like a frame rate snob or a graphic snob. I'm more of a is the game fun snob. Like, I just need the game to be enjoyable, and like as long as the frame rate is consistent, as long as the graphics are consistent, like I just need you to not draw attention to the fact that that stuff is inconsistent or bad, and then I'll usually be fine. Like, I find myself being much kinder to video games that have like frame rate issues than most people, especially when it comes to the like 30 versus 60 to oh my god 120 frames per second arguments. Like, I just don't care about that literally at all, really. Like, I just need it to be consistent. If it's 30 consistently, I'm happy. Pokemon and Scarlet and Violet were not that. They were not consistent. And if the answer to that is like, yeah, the Nintendo Switch 2 is more powerful and therefore it can just run that thing normally, maybe that's the answer. You know who would have figured this out already, though? People who emulate Nintendo Switch games. Somebody, hey, if you, well, I don't know, don't rat yourself out. But if you've maybe seen online somewhere that running Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on better hardware does in fact give a marked performance improvement, let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to know. Let me know. Generally speaking, I'm just excited to see some of these games like be a little bit more powerful than before. I'm too tall now. I'm standing on a chaise longue. I'm excited to see some of this stuff just like look a little bit better. Because I remember when the Nintendo Switch was announced in 2017, one of the big pieces of that announcement was that Skyrim was going to be on the thing. Like, they showed Skyrim running on it, and everyone was like, oh my god, can you believe Skyrim runs on that thing? You can have Skyrim handheld. And that was incredible in 2017. I mean, Skyrim had been around for a long time, but it was like incredible that you could run it on a handheld like that. That was a big deal. But that doesn't mean the Switch wasn't kind of like underpowered at launch already. Like, it is not the most powerful console in the world, and it didn't need to be, and it shouldn't have been. I think that's the important thing that maybe a lot of people forget is, like, Nintendo considers themselves to be a toy company more than anything else. Like, yes, they're selling video games, but they consider themselves to be a toy company, and they need to price their toys effectively for a children's toy market. And that usually means underpowered device, but like, man, people are going to squeeze that fruit and get all that juice out of there. And like, a couple seeds are going to come out at the same time. You're going to get a lot of seeds in there. I look at a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and I think this is so beautiful, and I really wish it wasn't on the Nintendo Switch. And maybe in a world where a dock upscales it to 4K automatically, again, with like really no patches necessary, I mean, that's going to be a pretty video game. And then that also raises questions about what happens when developers do patch the games. All of these games are backwards compatible. The dock automatically upscales them to 4K, and that rocks, and we're all very happy with that. But also, on top of that, every once in a while, a developer might just be like, here's an update. This thing's got 4K textures now, baby. That's the rub, though. That's the thing that I'm most curious about, is like, can the new Nintendo Switch... That's a name I didn't even talk about. The new Nintendo Switch. I hope they don't call it that. Anyway, the new Nintendo Switch. If they go that direction with it, is it even powerful enough to run 4K stuff on the console itself? I think not. I don't think it will. I think specifically the thing about the dock allowing it to upscale to 4K is going to be more about continuous power than anything else. It's going to be more about having it plugged into a power source. And that's a little in the weeds, but like, that just feels right to me. For those of you who know what TDP is, you get me. Here's a prediction, not a wish. I mean, it is a wish, but it's also a prediction. I think, and this is the lowest hanging fruit, and I hope it's true. It's just gonna have better audio support, like just better audio options. Not everyone, but a lot of people probably remember how weird it was that you couldn't use like Bluetooth headphones with the Nintendo Switch. Deeply confusing, very strange. Right now, the thing that's bothering me the most is like I got the USB-C Apple EarPods for my iPhone, so I could like have wired headphones, and I've been using them with pretty much everything. I've been using them with my iPhone. I've been using them with my iPad. I've been using them with a lot of my handheld gaming consoles that I use support them, and it's totally fine. The Nintendo Switch, though, does not, for some reason, does not have audio out through the USB-C port. It has a headphone jack, which is nice, but that's not the kind of headphone that I bought, because I was told that the headphone jack going away was a sign of courage. No, I'm just very content with pretty much everything in my life being USB-C. So I'm hopeful that the audio out options allow me to plug earpods into the bottom of it. That's a pretty niche thing, but I think that's probably going to be true. Okay, here's one of my bigger predictions. And it's also a wish, but it's really a prediction. I think that there's going to be some kind of theme selection on the next Nintendo Switch. And I think that there's two directions that this can go. Number one is that there's no theme selection at all, but instead, when you open the Nintendo Switch, when you turn it on, the home screen is very reminiscent of what we see on like the PS5 or the Xbox Series lineup right now, where it's like, here are your games. These are the ones that are installed or like literally plugged into the physical game cartridge slot. But also, here's a bunch of ads. You can play The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, or you can have it your way. BK, $5 off your next order if you do it through Seamless right now. That would be a mess. But I do think there's a world in which if they do that, it might also be similar to the PS5, where when you hover over a game, it like kind of reskins the whole Nintendo Switch home menu and user interface to look like that game and sound like that game. That would be kind of nice, but just like the jump from PS4 to PS5, I would be sad about that. Because I was already sad about that jumping from the 3DS to the Nintendo Switch, because the 3DS had a whole theme shop. You could go buy a bunch of themes, and it would reskin the whole system, and you could have a whole collection of themes that would reset or change and shuffle every time you close and open the 3DS, and I loved that. I had like, I don't know, 15, 20 themes installed on my Nintendo 3DS at any given moment, and boy, did I have them all shuffled. So every time I opened and closed the thing, I didn't know what vibe I was going to get. Sometimes the vibe of the theme that I saw when I opened up the 3DS would be the thing that actually influenced me to play the game that I was going to play. So I'd like open up the 3DS with the intent to play a game, and then it would be like, oh, it's the Super Smash Brothers theme. And then I would play Super Smash Brothers for the Nintendo 3DS, which, yes, was the better of the two if you were to put that one up against the same game for the Nintendo Wii U. The 3DS one was better. I have a theory, and maybe this is disproven by Sakurai's own YouTube channel, and I haven't watched the video about this one yet, but I have a theory that that game was supposed to be only for the 3DS, and then they went to Sakurai, hat in hand, and they were like, please, sir, can you make us a Wii U game? We don't have any. And then he said, sure. And then he just did it for them. Very nice of him. Very nice man. Anyway, I miss having themes on Nintendo 3DS because whenever I open up the Nintendo Switch and it is a completely gray, lifeless space, I really wish that I could imbue it with some kind of energy, some kind of aesthetic that is not just a themes option in the settings that literally only has two choices, dark mode or light mode. So boring. And I might be misremembering this. I'll put it up on the screen if I can find the source here, but I remember a bunch of news stories about Nintendo actually hiring a user interface designer to work on themes, and everyone was like, oh my god, they're going to actually update the Nintendo Switch software to include themes, and then that just didn't happen. I have to assume that that work is going towards the new Nintendo Switch. I think the next Nintendo Switch is going to have some kind of themes. Will they let us buy them? So much of Nintendo stuff is literally like people who love Nintendo or Nintendo products specifically being like, please let us give you more money, and then being like, maybe. And like that's the relationship with the fandom. But let me buy weird themes for the Nintendo Switch shop. It would be very funny though if they like opened that up to other developers, so it wasn't like just Nintendo making the themes, because then you would have the same problem with the theme library that you already have with the eShop, where there's just like 10 billion horrible themes floating around while you're looking for like the one good Shovel Knight one or something. And this is getting more into Wish territory, but I just want like the fun music and vibe again, you know? And I don't even think that's a nostalgia thing, but like the era of the Nintendo DS and the DSi and the 3DS and the Wii and the Wii U and even the GameCube when you didn't have a disc in, just having like fun or interesting music, like menu music, just hanging out and bopping into the different like versions of menus and settings and stuff, and all of it had its own little musical cue. I loved all of that so much, and I think that that really is the kind of thing that just imbues the brain with good feelings about your product. I think that Nintendo doing that was an extremely important thing for making people love their products. And it's not like I don't love the Nintendo Switch, but I'm not going to miss this era of the only fun sound you hear is when you attach or detach the Joy-Cons, or you go into the eShop, which is like maybe the most horrible piece of software Nintendo's ever made. Okay, and here's the thing that is, I think, more wish than prediction. I don't know if I trust Nintendo to do this, but I do feel like they're gonna have to make the eShop better, because right now it runs so horribly. You go and you tap on the eShop thing, it takes forever to load, and then every single tab takes forever to load, and then anytime you search for something, it takes forever to load, and it is so bad that, and I can't prove this myself, but I can tell you anecdotally from my own lived experience that when I go to the eShop on the Nintendo Switch, I am actively discouraged from purchasing things because of how horrible that process is. It is so bad that I don't buy a thing. Like, I'll be like, I am interested in buying this for Nintendo Switch, and then I can't bring myself to do it. I can't find the thing, or it just takes so long to load that it's too hard to find the thing. And by the time I decide, like, maybe this isn't it, I could have already been downloading the thing on my PlayStation or on my Xbox or on my Steam Deck even, or my PC or whatever. It behooves Nintendo to have an eShop that functions. I swear to God, if it wasn't for the ability to purchase games on Nintendo.com, I think I probably would have purchased a lot fewer video games for the Nintendo Switch. I think actually the Nintendo.com purchasing flow is like relatively good. Especially like if you're doing it from your iPhone, for example, where you can use like Face ID to input your password and stuff. It's like pretty easy, pretty seamless to do. I would prefer if they made the eShop better though. I think it makes a lot of sense for a company who wants to make money to have a purchasing flow that allows them to make money. On a strangely similar note, I hope that they fix the app. They have a Nintendo Online app that you can get for Android and iOS that's like almost really good. and is a really interesting idea. It reminds me of when Watch Dogs came out. There were like, all Ubisoft games from this point forward will have a companion app. And in Watch Dogs' app, you could be running around Chicago, and you could also have the app open on your iPad. And if you had it open on your iPad, you could like be hacking like streetlights and stuff from the iPad. And it was a cool idea. Like, you know, Watch Dogs did not deliver, I think, the experience a lot of people wanted. Watch Dogs 2, though. That was a good video game. But anyway, that first game did not deliver the experience that a lot of people wanted, but that companion app idea was a good idea. And Nintendo Online is an interesting idea that is also kind of not executed super well, because like right now, if you're a person who plays Splatoon, it's amazing because you can open up the Splatoon section of the Nintendo Online app and you could go see what the shops have. Like, you could be at a rave in some warehouse somewhere and take your phone out and be like, oh, I'm going to purchase these goggles for my Inkling or my Octoling. So when I get home, I'll have the exact stat loadout that I need for this next Splatoon battle. There was also an Animal Crossing piece of the app, and that was, I think, where I started to realize how much potential was being wasted here, because the Animal Crossing piece of the app, I was hoping that you would open it up and it would also show you like what did the shop have in stock that day, or even just like some kind of app exclusive furniture stuff that you could like order and then get delivered to your house in Animal Crossing, to your island in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And that didn't happen either. It just feels like there's a lot more potential there to build these like little tiny mobile experiences, because Nintendo is pretty avidly moving away from mobile stuff. They are shutting down Pocket Camp, as discussed on this very show. They're shutting down Pocket Camp. They're replacing it with like an offline paid version of the app. But Nintendo has gone on record as saying that they're kind of moving away from mobile in general. But also, if I was like, you know, God forbid, but if I was like a boardroom shareholder of Nintendo, I wouldn't want them to move entirely away from the device that literally almost every single person on planet Earth has in their pocket at any given time. That feels wild. It feels wild to move away from mobile in general, but to move away from it completely, that seems like not a good business decision, personally. But I think a Nintendo app that, like, first of all, just has the shop integrated into it, like the PlayStation app or like the Xbox app, for example, or the Steam app, where like instead of needing to open up Safari on my iPhone and type in on Google Nintendo Switch Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, I could instead just like type that into the app and buy it through there, and then it just starts downloading on my Nintendo Switch. That would be very nice. Okay, I have a couple more things, then I'm out of here. First of all, I think most Nintendo first-party games are going to become $70. They did that. They dipped their toe in the water with Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm sure they made money hand over fist and laughed all the way to the bank when they did that. But games are becoming more expensive to develop over time. Everyone knows that. I mean, honestly, just the way the current video game AAA industry exists right now is like totally unsustainable. So the price increase of $70, I guess, makes sense in some ways. You know, the alternative to that is every game is a live service. So I guess pick your poison. I don't know. But I think Nintendo is going to start making a lot more stuff $70. I think like whatever the next Pokemon game is, like when Pokemon Legends, the next one comes out, I forget what it's called. Pokemon Legends Z City. I forget what it's called. That game, which I am looking forward to. I'm being a little dismissive. I'm actually, that's like probably one of my most anticipated games coming for the next Nintendo console, because I loved Legends Arceus. I think if you were to put that, I've said this a lot on podcasts in the past, but I think if you were to put that and Scarlet and Violet next to each other and say one of these two can be the future of Pokemon, I would definitely pick Legends. Anyway, when that thing comes out, I think it's going to be $70. And when the next like mainline Pokemon game comes out, I think that's going to be $70. And especially when the next Mario comes out, when it's like Super Mario Odyssey 2 or whatever they decide to make that thing, I think that thing's going to be $70. There are some reports that the screen is going to go from 7 inches to 8 inches, and I find that interesting because that probably means the device will be a little bit bigger, if I was to guess. I don't think that you can just make up an entire inch here in the bezels, but that also means that the Nintendo Switch, or the follow-up to the Nintendo Switch, will not appease my personal dream of becoming small enough to feel comfortable bringing on commutes. Because right now, the Switch is just like a little bit too big for me to feel comfortable like putting it in my bag and playing it on the subway or whatever. I wish it was, but it's like there's something about it that just feels a little bit too cumbersome, a little too weird about playing on the subway. The thing that I do bring with me on my commutes every single day is the Ein Odin 2 Mini, which is just about the exact same size and shape and everything as the PlayStation Vita. And look, I know there's no world in which the next Nintendo Switch is going to be the size of this, but this is the size that feels like the most comfortable to bring with me on the subway. So the Nintendo Switch is basically a home console for me, even though it's supposed to be portable. Like, it's basically a thing that I'm just playing around the house for the most part, unless I'm like going somewhere for a long time. And them making it bigger, it's honestly fine. My big hope, though, is that the next Joy-Cons are a little more ergonomic, because right now the completely flat back, with the exception of the shoulder buttons, that's the thing that's really killing me, and I think most people with like kind of adult hands, is it just feels uncomfortable to play after a while. And that gets into my last big thing, which is the Joy-Cons. I feel like the Joy-Cons, they need some love in a lot of ways. Obviously, there's the stick drift part, right? There's the fact that they break. I mean, look at the Nintendo Switch Lite. That's the saddest example of Nintendo hardware during the Switch life cycle, because like it's the same technology as the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con, but firmly attached to the device. You cannot slide them on and off, which means that if the Joy-Con start drifting, the whole device is shot. And that's one of those things where like Nintendo just like didn't even publicly really acknowledge that the Joy-Con drift was a problem. They were like, oh, your specific Joy-Con seems to have an issue. That's interesting. You can send it to us and we'll fix it. But they were never like, yes, there is a widespread issue with the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con, which is very funny. I think that there is a 100% chance that there will be some kind of like Hall effect stick in the next Nintendo Switch Joy-Con. And if you don't know what Hall effect sticks are, they weirdly date back to the Sega Dreamcast. Maybe before, probably before that, but the Sega Dreamcast is the one that I always think about. The analog stick is basically, on the bottom of it is a bunch of magnets, and under that are a bunch of magnets, and it doesn't touch anything. It just uses different magnets to tell where the stick is, versus something like the Joy-Con, which is like literally little pieces of connective plastic like rubbing against each other, which starts to wear and tear, hence stick drift eventually if you use the thing enough. But Hall effect sticks do not have that problem. They hypothetically last forever. I think there's basically 100% chance that Nintendo's going to want to avoid the Joy-Con problem again the next time around and have Hall effect sticks in there. Here's my big prediction though about Joy-Cons. I think that you're going to be able to use Joy-Cons from the original Nintendo Switch on the next Nintendo Switch. The reason I think that is because Nintendo just released like some new accessories for Joy-Cons, and that feels like a weird thing to do literally at the very end of the Nintendo Switch lifecycle. The, again, widely reported on end of the Nintendo Switch lifecycle. It's weird to release a bunch of accessories for this generation of Joy-Con if they're not going to be usable next time around. Does that mean you'll be able to attach them to the next Nintendo Switch? I don't know. I'm curious about that, but I do think you'll be able to use them, at least, as controllers. There are also a lot of rumors that the next Joy-Con are going to be magnetic. They're not going to like slide on like the current ones do, but instead they're going to attach magnetically. That feels rife for disaster. That feels to me like the kind of thing that can go very wrong. I'm curious to see if that's true. My other big thought about the Joy-Con is that they're going to go all in on haptics the next time around. When they announced the Switch, they showed off all the stuff that's like, there are some little metal balls rolling around in the Joy-Con. Can you count how many there are when you roll it back and forth? And like the haptics were so good, it felt like there were little metal balls rolling around. That was really impressive. But how many games really use that? It was like WarioWare and 1-2 Switch, basically, was it. I think they're going to take a page from the PlayStation DualSense book and put some more haptics in here. Does that mean, like force feedback on the shoulder buttons and the triggers? I don't know. That feels maybe not Nintendo. This is where we go from prediction to wish a little bit, though. I hope that they go all in on haptics and at least have parity with the DualSense in some ways, because Phil Spencer over at Microsoft has also gone on record as saying that he wishes the Xbox Series controller had some more haptics in it, at least at the same level as the DualSense. I almost fell over and knocked this whole bike over. He wants the controller for the Xbox to be better, at least on the same level as the DualSense, because that means that developers will actually utilize that stuff for third-party games, right? Like right now, Astrobot, I think is the best example of a game using all of the haptics available in the DualSense, but that is also a game that is not coming out for the Xbox or the Nintendo Switch, although it'd be great on the Nintendo Switch, could you imagine? But in a world where, and we've already seen this through rumors, but like there's going to be an Xbox Series Pro, I forget what they called it, I forget what wasn't the code name Brooklyn? I think the code name was Brooklyn. But anyway, they're coming out with a new Xbox, just like PlayStation's coming out with the PS5 Pro. And I think if that controller has all of the same haptics as the DualSense in there, it will encourage, hopefully, third-party developers to start incorporating that stuff. And that means there's also a world in which Nintendo does the same thing with the new Joy-Con, and suddenly you have haptic feedback, like really interesting haptic feedback, being a cross-platform idea. Like that's a thing that all developers can implement on all three of these consoles and have it like make sense and be usable by all players. That's a cool idea to me. I would love to see them go all in on haptics with the next Joy-Con. That does mean they'll still be really expensive like they are now, which is sad, but I think that'd be nice. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the next Nintendo Switch until it's announced. And then we can all come back to this video and point and laugh at me. But I would love to hear what your wishes are. What are your predictions? What stuff do you want in the next Nintendo Switch that you don't have now? What stuff, like give me the most left field, completely wild thing that you think is going to be the next Nintendo Switch. Here's one stupid one that just popped into my head. I'd like it if I could download games while playing other games. I would love if the device was powerful enough to do that. I think that'd be nice. But what about you? Regardless, here's the thing. I like making the show a lot, and I'm glad to be doing it again. I'm glad that a bunch of you are here watching it and commenting and sharing it with people and telling me that you like it too. It means a lot to me. So thank you so much for coming back every week. I have more stuff that I want to do with this channel as well. You've probably seen I've been posting shorts pretty regularly. I've been posting like kind of edited Let's Plays of videos recently. Let me know if you're into that stuff. Let me know if you want more stuff. One thing I'm experimenting with doing is, I don't want to say a lot about it, but I'm working on something akin to like a pretty long form video review of a game. Let me know if you're interested in that. That's it. Either way, my name is Brendan Bigley. This is Wavelengths. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're listening on audio platforms, just a heads up. I actually haven't said this in a while, but if you want to, you can listen to this as like a podcast. This is available in all podcast apps as well. Not every video on this channel is available as a podcast, obviously, but these ones are. Okay, that's it. I'm going to stop rambling. I've been talking for so long. I've been talking for like, I don't know what this video is going to look like when I'm done editing it, but I've been talking for at least an hour and a half at this point. My voice is hoarse. My horse's voice. All right. Bye, everybody. Play Dragon Quest VII.